So welcome everyone. It's great to see you all out on this beautiful summer evening to talk about what allowing everything to be as it is means. So we've heard this instruction in spiritual circles to allow everything to be as it is. It's quite common. But do we actually know what it means and how to engage with it in our practice? Actually, it's a deeper question than it perhaps appears on the surface. From my years of guiding people on the path, I see a couple of, well, I'm going to talk about three common errors or misperceptions about this. First, people think they're doing it, they're allowing everything to be as it is, but they're actually strategizing for a better experience. And second, believing that you know what it means can actually be an impediment. And third, practitioners, meditation practitioners, take the instruction to be a goal. And then once it's set up as a goal, then of course the mind asks, are we doing it right? In this talk, I want to unravel these three issues, these three errors or misperceptions, and provide some pointers about how to know if we're actually allowing everything to be as it is. So much of our unnecessary human suffering, the optional human suffering, is a result of feeling separate and disconnected from the whole. And this is all optional suffering, mind-created suffering for the most part. And I think it probably comprises about 90% or more of our overall suffering. And it's optional because it simply arises due to our resistance to what is, or trying to hold on to what is. It's this endless struggle with what's arising in our immediate experience that causes the vast majority of suffering. So understanding what we mean by allowing everything to be as it is so crucial to the cessation of suffering, as the Buddha would put it. And this is really the fundamentals of the Four Noble Truths. The more we grasp and push away, the more we experience dukkha, the more we experience this optional suffering. And it's a vicious circle, because when we push away or grasp, we feel uneasy and anxious. So then we push away or grasp more to alleviate it. So we add layer upon layer of anxiety and suffering into our lives. Right? Maybe you feel anxious one day. So you start ruminating about how anxious you feel and how awful and uncomfortable this is. So you might try to push it away. You may even try meditation as a way to get rid of it. You're resisting it. And this causes you to feel more anxious and more uncomfortable because you can't push it away. The old saying, Carl Jung's saying, that what we resist persists. It kicks in and we suffer more. As the spiritual teaching is to stop pushing away and grasping. The teaching is to allow everything to be as it already is. Right? And on the surface, this sounds pretty simple. And we often think we're doing it. But when we really investigate and look deeply, are we really allowing everything to be as it is? Or are we allowing things to be as they are as we wait for it to change and get better? I learned this lesson so many times in my life as I evolved through this practice in many subtle and smaller ways, just a slight discomfort, and I would, bring attention to it and let it be as it is. And then I noticed I'd be checking in every once in a while to see if it was still there. It took me a while to realize that I wasn't allowing it to be. I was allowing it to be as it is with the hope that it would get better, it would shift. And of course, I won't go on too much about my concussion story, but as many of you know, I suffered these severe headaches as a result of 2 concussions. And I practiced for months, 8 hours a day of meditation, allowing everything to be what it is, trying to get rid of those headaches. Right? I was convinced I was allowing everything to be as it is. And then I would look, oh, the headache's still there. And it wasn't until I surrendered, and the words that came up with is, I can't fight this anymore. I literally exhausted my energy in struggling with it. And in that moment, all I could do was allow it to be as it was. And in that moment, I felt a release and some dissolving of the pain. Well, it's subtle. It can be in very subtle ways or very obvious ways that we're strategizing to get rid of something or for something better. I had a meditation student I was working with for years who kept telling me he was allowing everything to be as it is, but he still suffered intense anxiety. I repeated the instruction to him and asked him to investigate whether he was actually allowing everything to be as it is without any expectation for the anxiety to stop. And then one day he reported to me that he could no longer fight with the anxiety. Sounds familiar? And he got to the point where he just stopped struggling, and he felt really a kind of sudden and profound shift. And in that moment, as he reported it, he felt a deep intimacy with everything and everyone. So he felt connected rather than separate. So the practice here is to investigate to see if we are allowing everything to be as it is, or are we practicing a kind of strategy where part of us is allowing everything to be as it is, and another part is waiting to see if things will improve or shift. So there might be a really subtle strategizing that's taking place that we don't often see until we look deeply, until we investigate. So how do we know? How do we know if we're actually practicing this? I told you those stories as kind of pointers so that you could perhaps see if that's something that's arising in your practice. So that's one way to investigate and to look. We can also look and see if there's any aspect of our experience in the moment that we like or dislike or prefer or don't prefer. So if you can point to any aspect of your experience that you want to get rid of, then you're probably not allowing everything to be as it is. It's really that simple. Another way to determine whether we're allowing as a strategy to make things better is to notice if there's believed thoughts present. The believed thoughts that are arising. I'm not just talking about negative thoughts here. It's also not believing positive thoughts or thoughts that make you feel really good. Remember, this is about uncovering truth, this whole practice, and not about removing what's unpleasant or getting more of what's pleasant. So notice the thoughts that we tell ourselves, whether they are pleasant or unpleasant. They're all still illusions. The pleasant ones may make us feel good for a while, but they come at a price. So when we're present in the moment without resistance, a real profound shift occurs. And I'm sure you've all had glimpses and tastes of this, if not perhaps dwelled there for some time or are dwelling there in your life. You let go of the constant desire for things to be different. And instead we embrace reality as it's unfolding. As it's unfolding. We stop fragmenting our experience into I like this, I don't like this, I want this, I don't want that. By surrendering to the moment, our experience really unifies. It's no longer fragmented. I'll just address a question that always comes up. But what about, don't we do things in our life to make our circumstances better? And of course we do. It's very human to create better circumstances or experiences for ourselves. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't take medication if you have a headache, or you don't organize pleasant gatherings with your friends. We still engage in life in this way. Practice is to look and see, well, what happens if the medication doesn't work? You still have the headache. Or what happens if it rains on your outdoor gathering? So the tendency of the ego is to imagine that things would be better if things unfolded differently. And what I'm inviting you to do is to be okay with how things have unfolded. So I invite you to engage in a kind of experiment with your life as it unfolds, whether things are pleasant or unpleasant, whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable. See what it's like to approach what's unfolding without resistance. You might be shocked what you find. You might find that what we commonly think of as difficulties, or what the Buddha called afflictions, are not what we imagine them to be. By opening to them and allowing what's difficult, truth can reveal itself. Truth can't reveal itself when we're constantly struggling with what's unfolding, struggling with life. We're living a duality when we're struggling. When we stop looking for the opposite of what's arising, we step out of duality and we discover truth. The second aspect of this is asking the question what it means to allow everything to be as it is. If we assume we know what it means, then we may be trying to stop resisting and grasping and then looking to see if it's working or not. I hope you're following that. We can even make trying to let everything be as it is into something that becomes an activity of grasping. So one way to work with this is not to assume that we know what it means to allow everything to be as it is. We're kind of relating to practice as a kind of mystery. And this allows us to stop seeing if we're doing it right or not, or to stop expecting some outcome. Just stopping for a moment, of thinking that we know what it means. And for a moment, it shows us the way forward out of suffering. This teaching actually applies to so much of what we talk about here. We've been, over the last several weeks, really diving into some real deep teachings, titles such as, nothing is real and everything is real. And the mind can really try to figure this out. I was walking with my wife and telling her about the talk that I gave, and she said, "Wow, I'm surprised anybody even comes back to your group when you give a talk like that." And it's because it's very, the mind will just jump in and can churn with that. And so I thought I'd step back from that, that kind of teaching, although I really am in it attempting to point at a very deep truth. We can get caught up in the mind and wondering if we understand it right. Really, the most helpful thing we can do is stop trying to understand it. Just stop, even for a moment. And when we do this, we move beyond the division, created by our desires and judgments, opinions, and figuring out, and we tap into this a deeper level of peace, of interconnectedness with all that is. And then the third aspect is not taking the instruction to allow everything to be as it is as a goal. Instead, we look at it as kind of a foundation for practice. There's much more to the story of life. But without that instruction, you really can't see the rest of the story. The rest of the story is veiled when we're struggling with life. And we're letting everything be as it is, letting old age happen, letting sickness happen, we're letting birth and death happen. There's also something intensely active about life if we're engaging with it in this way. If there's any goal at all, the only goal would be to uncover what's true and real in this moment. And if we're not allowing everything to be as it already is, then reality can't reveal itself. If we're doing the strategizing that I talked about before, then we're simply trying to get rid of things. And it keeps us trapped in the trance of unconsciousness, the egoic trance. And if our aspiration is to see what's true, what's real, then we naturally let go of what we think we should or should do, or what should or shouldn't happen. So thoughts might arise. You might have a thought, oh, I wish that didn't happen. Or, I wish I didn't do that. But even when we have thoughts about how things should be or shouldn't be, thoughts about how things should be, not resisting them or indulging them. Right? We're simply asking the question, is this thought actually true? Does this thought correspond with what actually is? When the thought's seen for what it is, then no belief arises. And when there's no believed thought, when there's no belief, And there's the potential for allowing everything to be as it is. This is where Byron Katie's 4 questions, is it true? Is it absolutely true? Is very helpful. It's important that we don't use this instruction to avoid reality or kind of throwing up our hands and going, wow. Not being kind of passive or resigned. It's a foundation for practice rather than some goal, some way we should behave. So it's really important to use the instructions, that we don't use the instructions and investigation with the intention of getting rid of something. Otherwise, it's simply another tool to reinforce the ego. It's the ego trying to avoid going deeper. We're not trying to get rid of anything. It's all okay. We're not asking what's true or real to get rid of what's unreal. Our perspective is to have no agenda other than the deepest love for what's true and real. In this sense, it can perhaps seem passive when compared to the more often very aggressive nature of the ego. But it's not necessarily passive. So the instruction, allowing everything to be as it already is fundamental to the practice. It's fundamental to the path to the cessation of suffering. It's fundamental to our being open so that truth can reveal itself. We've probably all heard this, allowing everything to be as it is. I like to say, allowing everything to be as it already is. Because the moment that you notice something, it's already happened. The present moment has actually already happened. I have a sensation in my neck. I just noticed it. Oh, it's already happened. It may happen again and again. It may, repeat, but it's already happened. I'm not resisting what's already happened. That's what's happened. There's a sensation. Letting go of struggle, a word that I often use in teaching. Letting go of struggle with our immediate experience. We're surrendering to the present moment, embracing reality as it's unfolding. And without this resistance, we become unified as opposed to fragmented. When we unify in this way, a profound shift it just naturally happens. There's a deep sense of interconnectedness, as that student reported, a profound feeling of intimacy with everyone and everything in that moment. Allowing everything as it is breaks the cycle of samsara. The foundation for stepping off the wheel of samsara. We'll just end by saying that really noticing if there's a subtle strategizing that's going on when you're letting everything be as it is. Are you really looking to see if this allowing everything to be as it is will somehow make things better or improve your experience or get rid of something? I've never met anybody that hasn't done that strategizing. Right? It's just what happens. It's not a problem, but I think knowing that it is what happens can perhaps allow you to recognize it when it's happening. There's this strategizing, allowing everything to be as it is as strategy. I can see that. I can see that. I recognize it. I see you, Mara. So it's a very subtle Mara. I see you.